Good evening. I'm David Flora with Kitsap County Public Works, and welcome tonight. This is the first in-person open house the county has been able to do. We're also experimenting with the new system that the Board of Commissioners has in this room to try and simulcast a webinar as we go forward. So we're experimenting today as part of that, but welcome as part of that. You met Charlotte Garrido was here to welcome you, and she just left as we go through as part of that. And again, welcome. So this is the South Kitsap Transportation Implementation Strategy. Great names, our SKTIS. And some housekeeping is we're being recorded right now. And if you went on your announcement that you got for this and click on the access, that'll send you to the project page for this project. On the project page, you'll see the draft report. We posted it last night. So it has all the detail. We're going to basically just kind of walk through the draft report a little bit in less detail as we go through, but it's on the web. You can pull it down. It's kind of a big project, big file, but it has all the stuff you're going to see tonight, plus a lot more as we go through. You can also submit written comments on there. There's a little link. You can also send written comments to me at dfort@co.kitsap.wa.us as we go forward. Okay, there we go. And so for our agenda today, we're going to go through just a little introduction. I want to talk about the Transportation Improvement Program, our TIP program, because all this feeds into our TIP program. That's our document for implementing transportation improvements in the county. Then we're going to talk about what a TIS is, what we're doing here. We're going to go through some of the existing and future conditions that are in South Kitsap, talk about some projects that came out of that analysis, and also talk about how we prioritize. And this is a draft, what your comments are on that. Right after that, we'll have comments both online and in person as we go through. And again, we'll take written comments as we go through. If this works this time. All right, let's go. There we go. See if I can get this thing to work. All right. So the Transportation Improvement Program, that is our 6-year TIP. It is what we have programmed, projects that are predominantly funded, not 100%. There's still a little bit of floating money in that we program out over 6 years to build throughout the county, in unincorporated Kitsap County. It's funded projects. It goes through a very rigorous, to get on the project is very competitive. The projects are county-wide competitive. So projects in the south compete with projects in the north and in the central as we go through. And we try and balance what our transportation needs are with our available revenue. We've had a lot of challenges in the TIP. In the last 3 years, we've actually had to cut projects out of the TIP because of funding resources. More and more of our available road fund, which is the money we get from your property taxes in unincorporated Kitsap County, the gas tax that goes to unincorporated Kitsap County, and various fees like impact fees and stuff like that. More and more of that money has to go into maintenance, operations, and preservations. That is leaving significantly less money each year for our capital improvements, the projects we like to do or need to do. So as we go down, the nice paving job that was just on Pine that I wrote on this morning, great job. That's the money that we're putting into to preserve the roads. The culverts replacements and things like that are the ones that are starting to take it. We have inflation's hitting everything right now. It's been hitting construction for years. Some of the projects that happened in 2020, we have the Jackson Salmonberry Roundabout, which we were able to compete effectively for a Transportation Improvement Board state grant for that one, helped us get that project done. The Olalla Valley Road repave, we were able to pave 3.4 miles out there on top of our regular paving program because we were able to do a really quick reaction to a grant opportunity. So that was federal money going through. And Lake Flora is the type of thing that happens that really messes up our TIP. We had a nice culvert out there that when we We go out and we monitor our culverts very carefully for possibility of what their maintenance levels in, when they need to be replaced, fish passages. This one had no red flags on it at all until a storm came through and something undetected took it out. And so now, instead of some of the projects we had planned, we had to reschedule, reshift our design crews, our maintenance crews to repair that and put in a bridge. It was a culvert, now it's a bridge. And that happens a lot is we can't always replace a lot of the existing stuff we have now with like. It has to be new standards. And they always cost more money. So for the South Kitsap TIS, we're looking at the South Commissioner districts as part of that. And that includes the areas of Gorst and Naval Yard City area, right in Bremerton as part of that, but it's unincorporated. So what we want to do here is, this is an implementation strategy. We're not doing a planning study that we're looking through what is the best thing. We're looking at what is out there, what have we been thinking about doing, reanalyzing things, looking at it slightly differently. And then what we want to do is identify the projects that we can deliver within the next 6 to 10 years if the money was available. And what would be those projects to go forward? And that's the goal of this. Those projects will go forward as we select them into the TIP competitive process. They're just candidate projects, but these are the ones that are rising to the top that we want to put more resources into to better define the projects, the costings, and advance them in the potential of getting funded. So let's go through some of the existing and future conditions. We start with the comprehensive plan. That is where the county plans for its existing communities and its future growth. This project doesn't look at changing land use, saying, hey, let's not have urban growth there. Let's have rural growth or opposite. That's done with the comprehensive plan. We are to implement the comprehensive plan with our transportation system. What are our policies on transportation for non-motorized, for preservation? How do we incorporate those into our available revenue? The first one of the things we look at is capacity, or congestion is the common term for this. So those of you who were around for we've extended this project a little bit. It's supposed to be, we were supposed to have done it in about 12 to 16 months. COVID hit. And also we had we decided to redo our traffic demand model. Our traffic demand model is just that. It's a computer model where we put in the existing conditions, the road networks. It goes into a semi-black box. We put in growth projections. We think things are going to grow here. This is how many more employment's going to be in this little box over here. How much more housing is going to be in this little box over here. And it tries to guess using, what the computer people figured out, where people want to go and where it's going to go. And so it gives us an idea of where to look for future. And it basically comes back to how many vehicles, this is a very simplified version of it, how many vehicles are on a road right now versus what the design capabilities say it can do. How many cars can go on a 2-lane road versus a 4-lane road? How many cars can go into a roundabout and those type of things? And it feeds us back some level of service numbers that we equate to an A, B, C, or D. By our policies, a road becomes deficient that we need to really start looking at it when it starts to be an E or an F. In the urban areas, it can take more congestion in an urban area. In the rural areas, it takes less congestion to hit that. We do the same thing for intersections, except for our future is a little bit different. It's a little bit different model. For roadway segments, our future is 2036. For intersections, we only look 6 years out for future conditions because they change much more readily than segments do. And so we have a little bit different time horizon. And this is the map we have for our existing 2019 capacity that shows up. We have 6 road segments and 8 intersections that show up as saying that, hey, right now, you need to look at these areas because the model thinks there's congestion there. And so we do that. Our traffic division goes out and checks and validates what's going on and starts to monitor the situation as we go through and find solutions as we go through. The road segments also aren't totally clear cut. So we have Jackson and Lund that sits there. But when we look at the model, it's Is it intersection related or is it roadway related? We're still working on those type of questions. Molinex, we see a little bit of problems existing now going eastbound off of Molinex from SR3, Belfair Valley, SR3 and San Christopherson, very much associated with problems in Gorst and the highway. We have Old Clifton between the ramps. A lot of that has to do with the intersections with the ramps, not really the roadway segment, you know, those type of questions. We have then we have Loxaegan right in the Lake City area, or Naval City, excuse me, area. Just went through, and then you can see the various intersections that we go through. Future, we add 11 more road segments and 8 additional intersections that may be having future capacity problems. And one of the things with our model we look at, we calibrate it, the current one, to existing conditions. So we look at what the model tells us, and we look out there at what's really happening, go, okay, this works. It mirrors what we're doing, or pretty darn close to it. The future, we look at, well, what inputs did we put into the model about growth? And one thing we see on this is we do see a lot of that's came up is the Lake Flora, the Sunny Slope, and even the Old Clifton here area about with McCormick Woods. All of a sudden, there's, relatively speaking, there's not a lot of congestion or out there right now. But all of a sudden, it tells us it's going to be really bad in 2036. So we kind of wonder, is like, how could it jump that much in that time period? And so we look at the model and we see that the industrial areas around the airport have huge growth planned. And so if all that growth came and it came with the numbers, that may come out. So it kind of gives us some ideas about what is existing congestion or issues that we can validate right now. Which ones do we have to start monitoring? Which ones do we need to wait a little bit to see what really happens out there? And we'll see that as we go through the prioritization and the scoring process, we take those things into account. And in the report, you'll also see we give for capacity, we break down the actual section. So you see for each one of the major sections up there, you'll see what the model was telling us for 2019 and for 2036, and what level of service it's sitting at. So it gives you just a little idea of where the traffic may be coming from or where the problem may be. We also look at safety. Safety is exceptionally important to us. We monitor and update our safety list every year based upon the last 5 years of crash history. Right now, there are, and you see all the ones that are on there that had some kind of reported incidents and their ranking in the county. So we look at Sydney and Pine on there, you see that that's number 1. That's not number 1. That intersection isn't number 1 in South Kitsap. That's number 1 in the county as part of that. So Lund is number 3 in the county. And this map does change every year because one major accident in an intersection or a segment significantly skews the data. Nothing may happen for the next 3, but it's still until those crashes kind of go off the listing. So there is some movement in the safety list every year, but we have seen at least in the last 2 years that these are remaining pretty solid up in the top. We don't see a lot of movement. We also look at our traffic section, looks at what type of accidents, because that helps us with solutions. Are people being rear-ended? Are they being sideswiped? Is it pedestrian related? Is it intoxication? What is the problem? And especially with roadway segments, and roadway segments just, a length of road. We break it down into sections. A lot of times out there, we find out we can't really figure out what the problem is. You look at it, there's great shoulders, but a lot of it has to do with intoxication or impairment, which our designs can't do a lot for. And so we balance those off, and this becomes important to us in how we design solutions to address what the problems are. Biking. We have, the county has our non-motorized routes, which are the areas where we want to see those roads as they develop into better non-motorized facilities. That means for bikers and for cyclists or blades or, all the types of different mobility. So in 2017, we have a non-motorized committee of citizens that help advise us. Rick was is on the member now. Paul was on the original committee as we go through when it was started up. And so they not only help us identify what routes we want to prioritize for non-motorized and how we develop them, but also which ones we want to go after first. So in 2017, they looked at all the routes, and for the South, these are the ones they said, hey, these are the ones we want to concentrate on. And even though it says high, medium, and low, even the low is a high priority, because we gave them a limited number. You know, everything can't be a priority. So which ones do you really want to go after? And this rankings helps in the scoring when it goes to the tip competition. And last year, we asked them to look at pedestrian facilities. So they went and looked at all the existing and areas that are around schools, libraries, parks, commercial centers, and identified those areas in the South Kitsap where pedestrian facilities need to be improved, and they prioritize those. And so now we see, naturally, you'll or maybe not naturally, but you'll see in the urban areas, we see a lot of high priorities. We also see some out in Manchester, a little bit around a school right here in Lakeway. And we also have this connector that's come up. It's a great little idea. So down in the South Kitsap area between the parks, is there a way that we can connect those? And our non-motorized committee has in their work program to start exploring those. We've had to delay it because of COVID. It gets pushed off because of COVID and also some staffing issues. But the non-motorized will be picking that up as soon as they can to start seeing, well, is it feasible to put some connectors through there, some non-motorized connected paths? Culverts are also a major thing. There are a lot of culverts. As you know, it rains here. The glaciers came through, and in some areas didn't leave a lot of topsoil. There's a lot of wet land out there, and a lot of it's draining, and we have to deal with it. We have a lot of culverts, and so we have a program to monitor all those and try and prioritize which ones we do first, which ones our county workforce can do. If a project gets a little bit too big, kind of like that Lake Flora one where it becomes a bridge, it becomes a capital project and starts pulling money off the tip instead of the preservation program. And so it's a good part of that. Anytime we do a project, we touch a bad culvert, a fish passage we have to replace for the different project, we have to make the culvert good and we have to make the fish passage good. So that gets included in our prioritization. Are we, doing two jobs here when we do a project on a road segment? We're taking care of a bad culvert and a non-motorized need, and maybe a capacity or safety need on top of those. The more those get onto a project, more likely that project has a possibility of funding. Now for this program though, we're not prioritizing the individual fish passage or culverts that are standalone projects. For that, we use bucket funds, which basically we let the program decide which projects to prioritize based upon their analysis, and not part of the TIP process outside of the funding. Pavement's also a very important thing. The same thing. Our maintenance crew, we do a lot of in-house pavement work, as you see it. Well, you see it down on Pine in South. You going through. But sometimes the pavement projects are included in our projects, where if we're doing a project, some of the pavement will be improved. It depends on what the need is at that point. And it becomes a big project, and we can get other people's monies. It's always great to get other people's money, the federal money, the state money, anybody's money, that those become TIP projects also, and then draw off the TIP for matching funds. Because one thing that happens with other people's money is other people's expectations come with it, other people's rules and costs as we go through. We also look at the transit routes. We're not doing transit planning, but we want to plan for what Kitsap Transit is doing. So in our analysis, we look through, what is supporting transit, what can support transit, but we're not planning for their routes. We're not saying where they need to go. That's a different, that is part of their planning process. Ours is how do we accommodate their planned growth and their planned routes? Either it's with the worker driver buses, with fixed routes, our ferries and the Washington State ferries as we go through. So we went through that process. We went through the process of looking at all the old study we've done, new studies we've done, new analysis. We also looked at project ideas that have come up throughout many times. A lot of these projects have come up in our TIP process before, did not get funded, and then kind of fell off the candidate list again. Brought some of those back. In prior meetings, the open house and other things, we've gotten ideas from you. And so we included those into our analysis. And this is the map we have right over there. These are the projects. I think we have 56 projects that we thought had enough scope or need that it would show up in our scoring process. Because a lot of these are great ideas, but they would not, in our scoring process, they just will not come to the top. The congestion levels, the safety levels aren't there, but as we went through. So we looked at these 56, 53 projects. We also broke them down into and ranked them. So we scored them in our TIP scoring process, which has a criteria that the county commissioners approve to go through, and it's based upon our comp plan. And then we broke that down. We ranked all the projects by their score, but then we broke it down into geographic areas. That was the rural areas, the Port Orchard UGA, Manchester, and Bremerton and Gorse UGAs. The attempt here is to try and look at geographic areas and attempt to compare like conditions, because it's very hard to compare a road project out on Lake Flora or Burley-Olalla with a road project on Lund in the Port Orchard urban growth area. The needs are different. The scale is different. And we acknowledge that even our capacity, we have different levels of service standards in rural areas than we do in urban areas. And while we think that rural projects are really cheap because, hey, we don't put sidewalks out there. As our new county engineer, Joe Tan, right back there, says is, our projects are predominantly stormwater projects that we happen to put pavement or concrete on top of. That's kind of a secondary. It's always how we handle stormwater, how we handle rainwater is the big driver. And we see that even on rural projects, we go, wow, it'd be really easy to put shoulders out on that, that section of Lake Helena. It's already there. We just need to throw the pavement down there. But as soon as we put more pavement on there, we trigger stormwater that we now have to treat it. When that road went down there, when we repave it, we don't have to add anything to it. But when we touch it to a certain level, which is actually a pretty small threshold, all of a sudden we have to do a lot more than just put a little bit of pavement on some existing gravel as we go through, or go out there and dig up an old culvert and put it back in when we have seasons we have to because of the fish. We have to change our whole designs because of fish or anything like that that we go through. So we took all of our existing conditions, public ideas. We developed for conceptual projects of what they might do to address the needs. We put them into our TIP process. We scored them. Then we took all the projects, sorted them by rank. That it's a point score, the 1 to 56 going through there. Then we took those and we broke them down into regional 4 regional areas. To do the prioritization, to try and get a little bit of equity and to compare apples to apples, we then waited for this thing to turn. There you go. We started taking, generally speaking, one from each one of the areas and made it kind of a cycle. We'd go, okay, take one, the top ranking one R from each one of the projects, and then put that in the prioritization array at the top. We did some clarifications on this. We didn't, sometimes the top ranking project in a certain area wasn't necessarily one that we could actually do in the next 6 or 10 years for whatever reasons. Or we wanted to emphasize safety a little bit more, that the projects that were coming out at the top weren't really addressing safety issues. We had some safety issues that didn't score very well, but they're very high up. And I'll give an example of that one. Timing. Some of the scoring in our allows for a potential future event, condition to get points equal to an existing condition. So that's when we kind of looked at, well, maybe we want to look at existing conditions before we look at future conditions. Some projects had significant delivery risks to it. Either they're extremely complicated. We weren't sure how we could do it, or we couldn't deliver it. And some of it, we just needed more analysis. That kind of goes back to the ideas that we were talking about Lake Flora and, the congestion, the future congestion is we're not sure those conditions are really going to get that bad that quick. So let's just put those on the burner a little longer. So that allowed us to move down a little bit on the scoring, but we still tried to keep the highest scoring project moving forward. And that led us to our draft prioritization. These are the top 15 projects to go through as part of that. Now, these projects will, as we finalize this, this is just draft, of course, as part of that. We want to get input to see what moves up, what doesn't go down, why something shouldn't be up there, why something else should be. But these projects will now, when we finalize this, go into the TIP project as the prioritization for the South and compete against all the other projects in the county. And this is really hard to read. That's why we're going to go through all the top projects real quick. So this is Lund, city limits to Harris. And some of the reasons why this is on there, it's already on the TIP. We have a corridor study and some preliminary design work on this corridor. So we want to continue working on this project. Harris intersection has a level of service of F. The segment is anticipated to have a level of service of E, which are both failing in 2036. It's on the high priority for walking for the non-motorized. It's also a medium level biking route as we go through. It's on a transit route, and also it is a candidate for transportation impact fees as we go through. So there's a possibility of some more extra money coming in, dedicated money going through it. And this is an area to serve that urban area. We see with the Bethel corridor, clogging up, that a lot of people are using Lund as a bypass instead of just going on to Bethel. And this neighborhood, so how do we protect the neighborhood from that pass-through traffic and allow that neighborhood to come through? So the second one we have on here is the second part of that. So the first part was the first two intersections. Now this is from Harris to Jackson as we go through, continuing the corridor with the same types. We have the same types of conditions there, except Chase, which is the entrance to the park, is also a capacity project, problem right now, existing capacity. Then we go up to Lake City, or excuse me, Naval City. I keep saying Lake City. Naval City. We're currently doing a project on National for the STEM school, Safe Routes to School project. And right at the end of it is another intersection at Arsenal and National that has capacity issues. And it's also a safe route to school. It's to help get more impact off that project that we're doing now. Sydney and Pine. This is one of the ones where we prioritize safety a little bit. So Pine and Sydney was actually down ranking a little bit in the thing, but it's the #1 safety intersection in the county. So we pulled it up into a higher ranking for the prioritization because this is a continual problem, and we tried a number of different inexpensive solutions down there, and they're not helping that much. And so we need to do something down there for safety. So this is the one we pulled up a little out of the ranking prioritization in that district, but because safety. We also did that for Mile Hill and Woods. It's #10 on the safety intersections for about the same reasons. We wanted to bring that up. It's also will help service the Manchester area a little bit. Next, we go over to Mile Hill, Furcrest Village. The need for this one is the Furcrest and Mile Hill intersection is at level service F. And we're anticipating it will be an increasing safety problem going through. It's #38 on our intersection safety right now. It may warrant signals. What that kind of means is that that helps with what solution we come up with, is there has to be a certain analysis done whether we can put a signal in there. We can put a roundabout in there without meeting the warrant. So this helps us with design. It's high on the walk prioritization, and it's high on the bike prioritization, and it's on a transit route, and it's eligible for transportation impact fee funding as go through. So that's some of the things why it came up on our prioritization. Lake Flora, Hidden Acres to J.M. Dixon. It's the #1 safety segment. But this is one of the ones we're not really sure what the real problem is there, but it's level of service anticipated in F. We're taking that with a bit of grain of salt. There's some critical culverts in that area that we'd like to also take care of. It's access to the parks, non-motorized routes, and impact fees. One thing you'll see in the study, the thing about the Gorse bypass list is we have a little study in there where we looked at the culvert list, and how do we prioritize if all these culverts are the same condition, need repair? How do we prioritize which ones to go first? So we did a little exercise in the south that said, well, what would be a driver for the system that would push it? Looking at the system, we go, well, Gorse has some serious sustainability issues, resiliency. A flood, a little earthquake, and Gorse could be shut down. What's the bypass route if Gorse gets shut down? And we mapped that through South Kitsap, and you know what it is because everybody uses it for bypasses. So all the way from Lake Flora to going up to Port Orchard and going back down towards Pierce County. We looked at all the culverts on there and their ratings, and we prioritized which ones. And so we came up with a prioritization of, maybe that's one of the things we'll look at is prioritizing all these culverts on this bypass route in the south, maybe part of our prioritization in that program. And this one has some of those on those. Alaska, and this one was a prior tip project. We had it up to about 60% design, but then our funding dried up as part of that. So this is one of the projects that got cut. Even though we were designing it, we had to cut the project. So bringing this one back, it's high on the walk prioritization, and there's also a culvert replacement that we do as part of this. London Jackson. This is #3 on the intersection safety list. And this is one where we moved the prioritization a little bit because this one actually scored higher than Mile Hill. But we also looked at deliverability. If we are going for construction on the first 2 phases or so of Lund, that's a lot of construction that impacts on that neighborhood. That maybe we don't want to come and do one more project right after that. So maybe we need to move to a different area, do that project, then come back to that. And we're also looking at what exactly the solutions would be on this one. This one's a little bit, we were talking about our traffic section doing analysis. They keep looking at the traffic crashes that happen there, and they keep changing. Because it's this type of accident, okay, well, this type of design will help that. Then the next year they look at it, it's a totally different type of accident. And the design they were looking at really doesn't address, so what is the best solution is one of the ones that we want to do some more analysis on this one, but we want to move it forward also. Now we go back to the Lake Flora corridor and continue that through. Again, the capacity issues, fish passage barrier, and it's part of the bike prioritization. And then we go back into the urban growth area of Lund. And this is Lund to Salmonberry. We did that roundabout at Salmonberry last year as part of that. Very good one where we had Transportation Improvement Board funding to help us with that. And so this will connect the improvements on that up to Lund, again, to take care of that Bethel area and to help the non-motorized connectivity to the parks and commercial facilities and schools actually up in the north. And Mullinex. This one has a concurrent capacity problem as it went through. And so it's that hill. It's a bike high, it's a safety segment low. It has a high priority for bikes. There's a parking right there. But this is one of the very few where we're possibly looking at actually adding a lane, a climbing lane on that because of that hill. So that's one we're moving forward now. We're really going to look at that, whether it's really the intersections that are the problems or it's that climbing lane going through, because that's a pretty big project to go through to add on to that. And then we'd be widening the shoulders for non-motorized also as we went through there. This is back in Manchester, Safe Routes to School, where we have intersection improvement, or we have Safe Routes to School, and it's also on the transit route. And this is predominantly because of the Safe Routes to School and also community input. This is part of their prioritization process from the community to improve the performance of the California and Chester intersection, and then do the sidewalk intersection improvements on Chester and Madrone. That also hooked right up with the Alaska and some existing projects we did that takes them right down into the community center. And we're back into Jackson to do from the city limits and by Mile Hill to Ash, capacity issues, intersection safety, some improvements on the minor roads right there. It's high on the walk prioritization, high on the bike prioritization, and it's a transit route. And then intersection at Sydney and Leiter. Right now its level of service is at F. It's on the safety list, but it's kind of a low on the safety list. It's a non-motorized route. It doesn't meet signals, so we have to figure out exactly what the improvement will be here, but it's definitely one of the ones on Sydney. If you look on the larger list, there's some other issues on Sydney, but they didn't quite go up as high in the ranking as the intersection. And so those are the projects that we had on the prioritization list. And again, in the announcement that was sent out that got you here, as part of that, you can click on it, go to our project page, download the whole report, and also submit written comments as part of that. Or you can send it to me at dfort@co.kitsap.wa.us. And so we have question and answers, and we're going to take it from you. And also, this is for the people online. If you're a Zoom, to ask a question verbally, please click the raise hand feature, which is underneath that. That'll signal you wanted a comment. Your microphone will be enabled and you will be called upon to speak at an appropriate time. Or you can type in your question or comment in the Q&A dialog box. If you dialed in, dial 9 on your keypad to signal that you like to comment. The last 4 digits of your call numbers will be announced at the appropriate time. And please state your first and last name before speaking. If you're here, you can just raise your hand. And we do one more thing on next steps, and then we'll do questions. If I can get this to. So our next steps, we're going to receive input up to about August 11th. You can send in written comments. You can provide them here, however we get them. We'll review the comments and make adjustments as appropriate, and then issue the final report. As we were talking about, the whole thing about this is about implementation. We're trying to identify those projects that we think are the strongest candidates to address the needs that will compete effectively for the limited amount of money against other projects in the county. We're going with the assumption right now, very optimistic. We've been talking about very dire notes about we've been cutting our tip for capital projects. We're even to the point where we're having trouble being able to match available grant monies to advance projects. And so this prioritization list is not only what gets on the tip, but also is our candidate projects for grant monies. We don't go after grant money that isn't a priority project, because no grant money is free. It always is only for one phase. So, and you never get full, you rarely get full amount of money. And so a project going down and doing your number 50th project just because you can get grant money takes money away from trying to do your number 1 project. So we use this prioritization, the TIP process and the prioritization process, to identify what projects we could go after grant money for as part of that. And this enables us to help choose that process. And so these projects will go into our TIP project. We're hoping that additional funding will come available from whatever sources. And so we're preparing for that, as opposed to, we also prepare for a no action, existing revenues, declining revenue. We also want to be prepared if revenue comes available from whatever sources as we go through. So that is our presentation. So questions? Eric, do you have any questions?
So what's happening on Glenwood between Bethel Burley and the intersection with the bike path up the top of the hill?
I believe that's in the city of Port Orchard, so not sure. We can talk about project specifics that are current, offline, so to speak, as part of that. But I think that's in the Port Orchard and not one of our projects. Yeah. All right. Well, yes, sir.
Navy Yard City area. There was some improvements for Arsenal Way and National. You mentioned.
So currently we are doing a Safe Routes to School project on National from Arsenal down to Pebble, which are we are adding a left turn lane on National going on to Loxie-Egan going towards SR 16 or 3 at that point, excuse me. And we're putting a sidewalk on the west side all the way from Arsenal through the intersection all the way down past the school. And we are repaving all the way from the bottom of the hill at it's Charleston. There we go. Charleston Beach Road all the way to First Avenue of the city. So we have, and also Loxie-Egan's in this county portion will be paved. It's a great project they're working on. And so the one we have here is the intersection of Arsenal and National. So we're not sure the improvement. Right now, we're just putting it through as a intersection improvement. We're pricing it and exploring it as a roundabout possibility. But we will look, we're not dedicated to a exact solution yet. And that probably the prep for the the repave as we go through. And they're also doing some other work in the area. Yeah. And that's a long neglected area. Unincorporated, it is a island of unincorporated surrounded by Bremerton as going through. And so that's above my pay grade on the annexations. Yes, exactly. And it'll continue. There are questions of annexation in all of our areas as we go through. Let's go through. Yes.
Talked about a lot was the funding issue. Is Public Works looking at trying to find more funding in some way?
And on funding, we always follow the direction of the commissioners as part of that. We can recommend, we do a lot of analysis. Currently, before the commissioners is a increase in the transportation impact fees. And so they're considering, we've done as part of our traffic model update that we did that in prelude to looking at analyzing development's impact, potential impacts based upon growth as we went through. And so we went through a very systematic analysis of projected growth, the impacts on the roadway system, what proportion of that roadway system may be attributed to growth, and then put that into a formula to say, well, maybe we should consider increasing our impact fees for development pays a higher percentage of that impact, a proportionate share part of that. So the commissioners now are considering and will make a final determination in 23rd of August will be making their final decision at this thing, whether to do a increase to the fees. And right now it is a substantial increase as part of that. And that's one. If you want some information on that, we can send you some information as part of that. It's like what the numbers are and stuff like that. We're also looking at a number of opportunities. We always try to advise the commissioners on potential funding sources that the county has at their disposal if they choose to do those. Those can be from tax license tab fees increasing. They give you a certain amount of money that was still possible even after the because of the last election, or actually because of the court decisions. There's also our road fund as part of that. Is there a possibility of raising our road levy in the county? And so we are looking at different options like that and talking about multiple options of which ones the commissioners, but it is totally at their discretion on what they would like to advance, if anything. But it is something we are definitely communicating, is that we need more money for improvements. These are the things we're talking about here, the things that we're going to get comments from you about aren't the preservation and operations for the most part. It's about improvements you want to see. And those all come from basically the spare money in our system. We always want to maintain our existing system, make it operate as efficiently as possible, and preserve it as long as possible. And any money invested in that pays off huge dividends in the long term. But we have less money for the capital. That's why we've been pulling back on our tip the last 3 years as we go forward. Sure.
It's really apparent that the Puget Sound area has found Kitsap Peninsula. And there's a lot of growth happening in a lot of areas where huge neighborhoods are, moving in. Have you guys prophesized this real well and are accounting for this into this plan about where the high growth areas are?
This goes back to the comprehensive plan that I talked about right at the beginning. That is the county's plan on where they anticipate growth to go, where regulations and incentives try and drive growth to. From a transportation, we provide input on whether at the comprehensive plan level, what the system can anticipate. We do analysis at the comprehensive plan level on what we think the land use alternatives will do to transportation and what gets passed. But our role is to accommodate the comprehensive plan as we went through. And that goes back to one of the biggest ones is preserve and maintain the existing thing as your number one. Improve for certain levels of congestion, safety, and non-motorized. And that's what we try and balance it out. That's how we do in our TIP process, is based upon that. But our growth pattern, if I'm not mistaken, is pretty much online with projections that's going through. I mean, so while it may appear that there's some upticks, or there may be some upticks right now, over the period of the day, I think we're tracking approximately what the projected growth would be. I haven't heard anything that's told me that it's significantly higher. I mean, there may be periodic, small peaks, like this year's better than last year, but overall, we're seeing the growth that was anticipated in the comp plan and back in 16. All right. Well, thank you for being our guinea pigs for our first back in person and hybrid. And please send us your comments as part of that. And thank you very much.